Yeah, hi. My name's Alex Hernandez. I'm a journalist from Chicago, Illinois, born and raised here. I've covered the city and surrounding suburbs for most of my professional career. I graduated from Roosevelt University not too far away from here at 2009. Yeah, when I was in high school, I had fun writing papers, but it wasn't something that I saw myself being able to do, really, as like a profession. And I honestly didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was in high school. I just knew that I liked writing, I liked history, and I didn't know what combination of those would lead to a grown-up job, right? I get to college and I get asked during my like orientation by the freshman advisor what I want to major in. And again, I tell them, I know I like these things, but I'm not sure what I want to be, like what I want to do. So they initially put me as a psych major, which was like, okay, I'll take that, I'll see what it is. Like, he's recommending it, I guess. I take a couple classes, and it's not really not for me, but I had to take a bunch of history classes as part of my general, like, credits, and I also had to take a couple English classes, right? And I noticed while I was in those classes, like, I really, really enjoyed them. And I had gotten like compliments of some of the professors of like the way I was writing, and I was like, maybe I can like figure out some way to do this, right? After asking around and talking to some more professors, it was basically a choice between becoming an English major and a journalism major. And again, between an English major and a journalism major, the journalism major fit more into my fantasy of being Indiana Jones, because you're going on those adventures, covering stuff. And that's kind of then what I decided to focus and dedicate, like, the remainder of my college career and then now in my professional career doing, because I really, really just like the idea of not knowing what I'm going to have to deal with when I go to work. Like, I like the adventure of that aspect of it. I think that one of my strengths as a journalist is just analogies. So like I always use analogies to try to figure out how a complicated system works in my head, and then I'll try to double check with people that I talk to that know more about it. Like, this analogy that I'm making, like, does that make sense? Another thing too then is just because I'm bilingual, I can speak Spanish way better than I can write it, but it gives me access to communities that like would otherwise not be covered as well. And like there is Spanish language media in the city of Chicago, but they'll really write to like a non-Spanish audience a lot of the time. So I like that I can kind of be a bridge between Hispanic communities who primarily speak Spanish and like bring their issues and bring the things that they care about to like an Anglo audience that speaks primarily English, and be like, hey, like, this is happening in this community, like, you may not be aware of it, right? So like one of the projects I'm is 90 Days, 90 Voices. It's about immigrants, it's about people who are undocumented, asylum seekers, refugees, and specifically because I've talked to marginalized communities in the past, it's one of those things when you're reporting on it, you're trying to make sure that you're not trying to do harm to the person, right? So like I've talked to other reporters about this too, where when you're interviewing an undocumented person, right, they may not be as familiar with the interview process like an elected official, like an alderman or like a police officer or a fire person, like someone who's media savvy, right, who does it every day. They may not be as familiar with those additional like consequences of talking to a reporter. And so like I'll do things like, hey, you mentioned where your kids go to school and you mentioned where you work. Are you sure you want to include that in the article? Because potentially, ICE could use that to like find you and deport you, right? And there was actually an article not too long ago that came out where ICE was basically saying they were doing just that, like using journalism about those communities to identify people to deport, right? And that's one of those things where like I'm always trying to tell other reporters that like you have to treat sources that are not as media savvy, like marginalized communities, like a different set of rules, or just like you gotta hold their hand through the process, as opposed to like, again, like an alderman that is pretty like aware of what the situation is between you and it. So part of the reason that I like journalism also is you get to teach people stuff, and you try to take things that are either very complicated and simplify them, or just like, this is the thing that I know about that I think is interesting. Here is an article about it, or someone I talk to thinks something is interesting, and like I write an article about what they're talking about. So like a lot of it is education in that regard, with like really good journalism, in addition to it being well written and interesting, it has to have like a sense of utility to it. Like, why is this information useful to the audience? And so like that teaching aspect is something that I'm really I'm proud of when I get to do something like that. I did a story about 911 and how 911 works not too long ago. And it was basically me learning the computer system that 911 uses to send calls out. Yeah, exactly. And then within that, looking at where like language barriers can be an issue, right? And again, that was a whole thing where I got to talk to people that are not primary English speakers and ask them in Spanish, like, where are the weird issues when you call 911? It was the translation service that could create delays, right? So then I got to write an article and make a graphic journalism comic, which is like a nonfiction comic, explaining how this computer system works to like the city of Chicago's audience that read the article, right? So like that was the cool thing of like teaching, like this is something I know about the city that I get to share with everybody now.